Hello, and thank you for stopping by to listen to my experience during my BCM325 live tweeting events. Week 1 had us watching 2001 A Space Odyssey. This was a very strange and way too long film for my non-sci-fi film watching brain to take in. This film had me questioning many aspects of the film that made very little sense to me, like why it took 15 minutes to hear a voice and why the astronauts were walking with gravity although they were in space. I found that these events began to make more sense when my peers replied to my queries and gave me their perspectives. These interactions overall were significantly insightful, especially reading throughout the BCM325 hashtag. These tweets were the first of many to come, and they introduced me to the standard that everyone else was tweeting at. Week 2, I decided that maybe preparing some tweets to post would allow me to engage in the movie a little bit more. Although I did have full prepared tweets, I still felt that I struggled to keep up with our second film, Westworld. Not necessarily with tweeting, as I felt I interacted more with my peers in the discussions that were taking place, but I struggled to keep up with watching the actual film. I didn't question the film as much as I did in week 1, but more the reason why the film's setting of an amusement park is seen as adult fun. Violence for me is not something I enjoy watching, and I felt as though this film made me question why a person would want to partake in a future world like the one depicted in Westworld. In week 3, I took a different approach. I wanted to focus more on the images and the things that were being said or put in the film that my peers may have overlooked whilst watching. The first thing I wanted to make notice of was the makeup of the female characters, since our film Blade Runner was set in November of 2019. I must say that the makeup felt more like old Hollywood glamour rather than the actual makeup we had in 2019. In this film, I noticed the clothing more than in the previous films. Some scenes had outrageous outfits that reminded me of the costumes featured in the Hunger Games, but more specifically the outfits from the Capitol. These two tweets about the fashion and beauty industry had a few of my peers discussing the trends and how they agreed. Week 4 saw me struggle the most with our live tweeting task. Our film for this week was Ghost in the Shell. My biggest issue was not being able to listen to the film and understand it in English without having to actively watch it. I felt lost trying to keep up with watching the film, reading the subtitles, tweeting, and engaging with my peers. This week was simply overwhelming. Ghost in the Shell had me quite frustrated. It felt more like a current event rather than some possible future. I struggled to distinguish the storyline and therefore struggled to engage with conversations with my peers. I can quite confidently say that week 5 was my favourite so far. The storyline made the most sense. Although The Matrix is just over 2 hours long, it didn't feel as long as our previous weeks, which for me all felt never-ending. This film created many discussions between many tweets, and whilst reading other tweets, another layer of sense-making was introduced to me through the insights that my peers brought to the discussions being had. This week had me prepare tweets, but to my surprise, what I observed whilst watching the film was more productive to tweet about, and therefore not all my prepared tweets were used. Although I still questioned aspects of the film, I found that things in this film were explained well enough that it didn't have more questions than answers when it ended. Our live tweeting tasks have been difficult, but as I've continued with each week, I have discovered new things about my preferences and have developed my own live tweeting style, and I'm excited to see how our future week's live tweeting tasks proceed.